God bless. This is NFL-Moneyball, brought to you by NFL Extended Strategic Principles, or NFL ESP, found on the web at NFL-ESP.com. I am your host, Mark Anthony DeBello, and you can find more information on me and this program by going to my website, markanthonydebello.com, and clicking on the Sports tab. Today is Friday, November the 6th. We're in Week 9 of the NFL season. As in previous podcasts or audio recordings, as these are, this is going to be a half-an-hour program. I'm looking to extend my fingerprint on this program and systems fingerprint in the media community, whether it be on the internet or a radio show or prayerfully, hopefully one day television. But again, it's a hard road to hoe when there's less than knowledgeable people in the media who are being paid a lot of money to give incorrect opinions, and they don't have the time, as I'm blessed to do, to lock myself in a room, pour over reams of data, and have the spiritual, godly insight and thought processes that I have and am able to do, and they have never developed a system like NFL ESP, which is one of a kind and has been proven to be very prophetic, predictive, and productive. Again, the second aspect of NFL ESP is with the hope to get it to an NFL team or teams, primarily one team, with the hope of increasing their regular season win total by 2 or 3 games, and using the system that incorporates the strategic, motivational, X's and O's, and spiritual information and data and insights. So, having said that, again, this program is going to be broken up into 3 segments. We're going to cover the games from the NFL ESP point of view. Secondly, as that relates, and sometimes it's sort of commingled and synergistic with NFL ESP, how that equates to those of you who might have an interest in Nevada, although again, we believe in the integrity of the game. We don't believe people should use, we don't use the B or G word that people tend to do on games. They don't need to do that. I don't believe they should be doing that. I believe in the integrity of the game, but again, to Mr. Goodell, God bless, or anybody in the NFL who either doesn't have the vision or has some fearfulness, this information is valid information. It's the most accurate and least understood, most undervalued data and research information, numerical, statistical, you can find with regards to any pro sports games, especially NFL games. And why shouldn't it be used to help coaches make better, more probable and productive basic strategy decisions instead of just use the way that they're using it in Nevada, which again makes no sense to me. The last segment of the program, which I don't usually devote a lot of time to and will again try to, as I always vow and apologize for not following up on, is with regards to fantasy football and how certain information can help there. But again, the reason I'm not doing that is because I'm taking a more active role in playing fantasy football myself. Already won a contest, as I noted, in Week 1, but since I'm out here in Nevada, what they did was they had some licensing issue because out here the casinos and sports books realized that fantasy is making millions of dollars. They want to get their piece of the pie. They're not. So now they've petitioned to have, to call it the G word, and that needs a license. And now nobody in Nevada, and actually a couple other states as well, is allowed to really register or play. So having said that, I'm working around that and trying to do my best to participate, but still the data and the insights that I'm offering here, not all of them freely, because you offer it for free, people don't think it, excuse me, if you offer it for free, people don't think it has value, or they're going to take advantage of it and not compensate you. So I'm not going to give that much information, but I am surely going to give more accurate and hopefully and prayerfully insightful that you're going to get than you're going to get from anywhere or anyone else. So having said that, my note again was that I had won a contest in Week 1, but the powers that be decided to cancel it. They moved these fantasy Super Bowls, if you will, out of Nevada and put them in San Diego and L.A. So, and I don't want to talk too much about it because I mentioned last week, if you talk about something, you J-I-N-E-X it, okay? Satan gets a hold of it and steals it. You just have to kind of visualize it. And then that's a sort of a secret language between God. And just never forget that math is a language of the Lord God. And it's surely something that I just watched the Theory of Everything last night with Stephen Hawking, and you can surely put a mathematical equation to any or many things or everything, but you can certainly maybe not everything, but you can surely do it to NFL football, and that's what NFL ESP does. So let me go over last week quickly, get to this week, and then get to some fantasy and any other thoughts that I might have. Last week, we projected, Ashley started off with an incorrect assessment of the Lions against the Chiefs. The Lions had their coaching changes. They were traveling. I guess it really did take their toll, and then they've actually gotten rid of their president and GM this week. I had to actually put in for the Lions this year to work with them because I also put in with the Pistons, having known Coach Van Gundy before he got the hire there, but neither one signed us on, and they're not performing well, not surprisingly. That's also for a spiritual reason. Kansas City, like I said, had a bad record, is better than their record. We actually projected them to be second in the AFC East. I still think they'll get there ahead of San Diego, who's missed a lot of opportunities by kicking unproductive field goals, which I mentioned last episode or last show. So anyway, the next game was the Bears and Vikings. As we projected, that would be a very close game. Most people invested in the Vikings. As I said at the beginning of the season, basically, and I give some credit to the media who during the Hall of Fame game thought that there was, I guess, quote unquote, word out that Minnesota would be pretty good this year. But as I mentioned, they have a good, sound defense, and they will probably be, we projected early in the season an NFC wildcard team. The Bears doing better than expected. Coach Fox doing better than my former, or I guess still hopefully current friend, I don't know, Coach Trestman. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because I want to make a note on Denver later, how we might have undervalued Denver until I realized they got Coach Kubiak, who I actually like, who came from Baltimore, and he is a much better head coach than Coach Fox. And it's showing with Denver this year, and you're going to see that. And Denver is a really high power-rated team now, and much better than last year. The reason I didn't like them last year, and we actually picked Indy against Denver last year, where they won that playoff game, was because I'd met actually Coach Del Rio, who was on Coach Fox's staff, and God bless him, but he didn't seem very spiritual. And Coach Fox, I do believe, has some spirit to him, but I just know from other information that he isn't at quite the level and could definitely use NFL ESP to win a Super Bowl. So anyway, having said that, and I'll get touch base on those games later, Tampa played Atlanta. We projected Tampa would upset Atlanta, and Atlanta was highly overrated. Tampa did upset Atlanta, not surprising to us. And again, I'll talk more about Atlanta and Tampa's game this week. The Giants and Saints, as I noted, this was a really, two bad teams. You could tell by their defenses, obviously a 52-49 game, but they come out of two of the weakest divisions, if not the two weakest in the NFL, which is the NFC East and the NFC South. They competed against each other, and again, you never know what you're going to get with Eli Manning. The Saints, I think, we actually had either winning that division or Carolina. So I think the Saints are going to start to make their move in a sense, only because they had turnover issues last year and they had them at the beginning of this year. St. Louis was a surprise team we liked. What I made a note about last year was that they needed to draft a running back. I thought it would have to be Gordon because Gurley had a knee problem, and I would never draft a player with an injury. I didn't know he rehabbed from it so well and got back into the lineup so quickly, and it's made a world of difference for a sound defensive team. And I also mentioned last season about how low-rated Sam Bradford was. You're seeing that with the Eagles, but that they got rid of Bradford and got Nick Foles. I don't know that Nick Foles is the best quarterback in the league. I don't believe so, but he's definitely better than Sam Bradford, and that combination together is helping St. Louis. San Fran, as many projected, and usually when the media speaks, if they say 10 things, they will get one accurate, one correct and be accurate about one, and they were about San Francisco. as we also projected, and everybody knew they had the losses, the change of the coaches, whatnot. But Colin Kaepernick, who I actually have power rated as a pretty darn good quarterback, and I've seen Blaine Gabbert play, and I do not think Blaine Gabbert is a very highly rated quarterback. But Colin Kaepernick's been playing really poorly, and in the main note, and I finally heard, I think Coach Gruden say it when they were on TV last week or the week before, finally say it, that and again, you'll hear me say this again repeatedly, the biggest, if you had to balance out every statistic, and if every statistic balanced out, the one that makes the most meaningful difference is what a quarterback does on third down, primarily on third and long, and primarily when he rushes for yardage. Okay, and Colin Kaepernick can do that, but he hasn't been doing that. When he's in trouble on third down, and you see a lot of running quarterbacks do this, I don't know why. It cost R.G. Griffin his starting position. There's others. I don't want to name all of them. Robert Griffin, RG3, is that he throws the ball out of bounds. You know what? If you do not throw the ball out of bounds, in the long run, you'd be better off to run. Even if you were sacked and lost some yardage, you're in the for the gross at the end of the game, or in the net. I should say, I'm sorry. You're going to gain more yardage by running. When you throw it out of bounds, you know you're not gaining any yards, okay? Surely you don't want to fire and force an interception, but you know what? Colin Kaepernick can run. You got to run, okay? Again, third down, the biggest production from quarterbacks, especially highly intelligent quarterbacks, is, what they do and how they produce on third down. And so, anyway, having said that, that's the Niners issue right there in a nutshell for the most part, besides some of those other things. Arizona defeated Cleveland. Arizona, again, is our pick for the NFC. Between them and Green Bay, and probably if Carson Palmer stays healthy, they'll beat Green Bay. Cleveland, again, Johnny Manziel played this week. I guess had a good start. I didn't see the game, and then finished the game poorly, but he was playing Cincinnati, who's actually a pretty good team this year. Overrated, yes, but don't be mistaken. They've got a very weak schedule of teams that they're beating, but not surprisingly, they defeated the Browns. The Bengals played the Steelers in a game we had. It's a toss-up. I saw that game. It came out to be a toss-up, basically, with Cincinnati finally winning in the end. Ben Roethlisberger, his second game back, will do much better. Le'Veon Bella's out, but you know what? Pittsburgh for the last few years have been able, almost like Denver, to put in, the next man up running back, and because of their scheme and their ability, have been able to have a good, sound running game. And again, I think Pittsburgh will do much, much better this week against Oakland. But again, I'll get into those games from an NFL ESP perspective. So again, the Bengals, that was the Bengals and the Steelers. Ravens and Chargers played a turnover-free game, I think. Not surprising. They were close as they were. Fortunately for Coach Trestman and the Ravens, they won, regrettably. However, they didn't use NFL ESP this year, and they're not winning as many games as they should. And they were on close games, which they needed to be more aggressive, obviously, but their analytics person, who never got back to us, or at least did at one point, I don't want to get into the whole business and politics of that, but God bless them. I would still love to work with the Ravens. They actually called Mr. Bisciotti's office. Of course, they won't get back to me. I shouldn't say of course. I hold out prayerful hope that they do. But offered, and really just want to get my NFL ESP to the owners, because here's the mentality that I have with that. And I use the analogy, if you want to land on the, be on the top of the mountain, many people will tell you have to take it from one step at a time from the bottom up. Well, you can also charter a helicopter and land on it from the top. So, the owner is the brightest, hardest working, most successful member of any NFL team, okay, the 32 owners. Then obviously you trickle down to the president, the GM, the head coach. I mean, maybe somewhere along the rankings somebody's a little higher than another, but nobody's more powerful, obviously, and that's what NFL ESP is about, power ratings and the power spread and increasing your power and productivity, than the owner. And he is, if these other guys were as smart as the owner, they'd be owning teams. So I'm not disrespecting anyone. Many of them are geniuses and very bright men. I'm just saying to give, a piece of gold to somebody who doesn't recognize it's gold, thinks it's a penny, it loses its value, okay? Owners recognize where the gold is. So I need to start addressing and getting, proposing NFL ESP to the owners. So anyway, thankfully, I'm glad that the Ravens won. The Chargers, as noted, when they had their time to win games, we're being unproductive in kicking field goals. You heard me mention, and I'm not going to repeat it again, on what our mentality is on field goals. The Titans played the Texans. Without Mariota, the Titans had no chance. Zach Mettenberger is not a starting quarterback. If he were, they wouldn't have drafted Mariota, and I, again, still think Mariota is a star. Should have been Rookie of the Year, but, again, the Titans have, no real offensive line. They do have good skill players, I think, because they can build around, and their defense has always been weak. And eventually, if you have a weak defense, your defense breaks, and it takes a toll on your offense. But Houston is a very poor team. I'm still holding true to that. But somebody had to win that game, and it only made sense that Houston would in a game we actually thought would be 50-50. We did project the Raiders to upset the Jets. The Jets are the better team. Everybody's talking about the Raiders now, so that means you don't want to, do anything really with the Raiders in one perspective. But, the Jets, their quarterback went down. That's going to be a problem for them. I made a note to them at the beginning of the year when I interviewed with them. Geno Smith's the lowest rated starting quarterback in the NFL probably in the last 10 years. I guess he did throw well later in the game, but again, it's always a team game. I do know, we are aware of that. And it's team offense, team passing, team interceptions, team everything. But again, the Jets are performing well with defense, and but the Raiders were our pick that game and did upset and win. Seattle in a game much closer than we had expected against Dallas. Seattle, again, not as good this year. They're on the downside. They had their Super Bowl, and every year for the next 3 or 4, usually you see these things in about a 4-year cycle, they will decrease in their won-loss percentage and totals and how far they advance in the playoffs. Still a quality team, and definitely better than Dallas, but at Dallas, who does get some good home calls in Jerry World there, and I do respect Mr. Jones a ton. We actually tried reaching out to him just to give him a gift this week, but that didn't work. Everybody got so fearful and business-like and political of just a simple gift, and everybody was worried about branding. I don't want to get into the whole story. Sorry to be so forthright and frank, but I'll just say quickly, my brother, I don't want to say because I was trying to help my brother. And then lastly, the Broncos and the Packers. I have to admit, I did not think the Broncos would beat the Packers, even though they're home, even though they're undefeated, even though on a Sunday night, which you would always lean toward the home team. For whatever reason. Again, I'm giving you more of a Nevada perspective. I'm trying not to, but there's a few people, many people actually, who professionals, if you will, who take this data that I generate and disseminate. They're called the power spread. They twist it, call it a different kind of spread, manipulate it, move it, however the money comes in, and they use the differential in the number to profit. Well. Again, having said that, a lot of people were investing, I suspect, in Green Bay, and I did think Green Bay was a better power-rated team. But after watching that game, and Green Bay also, I'm going to make New England as well, getting more injuries, they're bound to get their first loss, and Green Bay obviously had theirs. But Denver, I think, is better than I had originally thought. I thought they would just, I guess I undervalued Coach Kubiak. I didn't just make the connection. I knew the reason that they would be better was because of the head coach. They had a change in head coach. I just didn't, value him as highly as I should have and make the connection quick enough, soon enough. So, again, I wasn't perfect there, but I definitely, and anybody can probably have, tell you that New England and Denver are the tops in the NFL or at least AFC for sure with regards to power ranking. But, again, that was, that's all basically the head coach right there. So let's take a look at this Sunday. And I'll talk, speak from a power spread perspective, an NFL ESP perspective on some of these games. And it's going to transition a little bit into Nevada. I'm not going to clearly segregate the two. And then I'll wrap up hopefully with a little fantasy. So the Thursday game is already in the books. I looked a little bit at the box score. I'll actually turn it on now, tell you a little bit of how I would analyze this game, just to give you a little bit of insight. Cincinnati won 31-10. I want to look at the plays here. I see Tyler Eifert had a big day for you fantasy players. Typically, unless it's a real tight end heavy, premier tight end team like, let's say, Jason Witten and the Cowboys or Olsen and the Panthers, when Jimmy Graham was with the Saints. Usually, by the time you're throwing to the tight end, he's usually the third check down. The split end or wide receiver number 1 is covered. The flanker wide receiver number 2 is covered. So you check it down and you get to the tight end, which means to me, although Cincinnati is a little bit more of a tight end favoring team, but when you've got A.J. Green and either Sanu or the other, I don't know who the other gentleman is on the other side. That means Cleveland actually played pretty tough defense, that they had to throw to Eifert so many times, and especially down at the goal line, a 9-yard, a 2-yard, and a 19-yard pass for a touchdown. But as to Cincinnati's credit, I mean, they're a more complete team this year, or actually a pretty good team. Where they fall apart is their head coach, God bless him, in the playoffs. Again, it's a whole team effort. It's not just Andy Dalton, as people want to say, but I don't think Cincinnati recognizes that they're the underdog by the time they get to the playoffs. If they're winning their division, you could be 16-0, but if you're not power ranked higher than Denver or New England, and you get to the playoffs and you play a status quo game when you're on the road to either of those teams, you don't make any aggressive basic strategy decisions, or the most probable or productive ones, you're not going to win the games. And that's really usually what happens with Cincinnati. So I'd love to work for the Bengals. I just don't know how to help them or how to get them to believe. But again, another season going by here, or even it's the media, and just you try to tell the media this to get the media to influence the staff and the head coaches and the fan base and all, especially the officials, which is basically home field advantage, and they don't listen. They mock and give you their incorrect assessments, and they just don't have the depth or brevity to quite understand. God bless them. So that's one thing I noticed about the scoring summary there. And then I'll look at the first downs and total yards. Cincinnati basically was 160 yards to plus in total yardage. That means you should probably win by, if it's 100 yards, let's say, for 7 points. So you should probably at least win by 10, 13, 14 points. We have different models, and they ended up winning by 21, so it shows they were pretty productive. They only kicked one field goal. So I give them points for that, but they obviously were a better team. They were actually a double-digit power spread favorite over Cleveland. Cleveland had Johnny Manziel, who I'm a very, very big fan of. He was 15 to 33. Obviously could have done better than that. No picks. I don't know how many yards he rushed for. Let me see. He rushed for just 4 for 31. He should be running more than that. Crowell ran 10 times for 38, and stats can be misleading, and when you hear the media and people talk about stats, they really never talk about them correctly, but I'm just giving you the way they would give it, but 10 carries for 38 is 3.8, 4 for 31 is 7.8, so run more, Johnny Manziel, okay? And you should have been doing that anyway. In Cincinnati, actually, Andy Dalton ran 6 times, but again, those could be scrambles. I didn't see the game, sacks and whatnot, so having said that, and there were no fumbles, so it's actually a clean game by both teams. So being in Cincinnati, and they're a huge, as I've mentioned before, a huge home advantage team. I can bet the penalty calls, definitely favored Cincinnati. 4 against Cleveland, only 2 against Cincinnati. That's really low. Just 2 penalties on a team. So that's to be expected. Like I said, Cincinnati is definitely a 7-point home field team, 6 or 7. They played through the number in a sense. They were 10-point power spread favorites. There were no turnovers. They won by 21. They were productive. They got home field calls the way they should. So that game probably came out pretty close to what it should have done, which, tells me Cleveland should have been more aggressive, and Johnny Manziel especially should have done more, being that he was at the, running the show there. All right, so let's run down these NFL games quick this week in the last 7 or 8 minutes we have here. Pittsburgh, I think, is going to run through the power spread number. They're basically just 4.5, which is their home field advantage. They're a good, strong home team. Oakland, not as much when they're outside of their stadium. So Pittsburgh can play sort of a normal game there, if you will. No major decisions. Oakland, who's got Coach Del Rio, who I mentioned earlier, Coach Del Rio does not follow NFL ESP at all. He's going to coach that game or make basic strategy calls like he thinks he's on a 50-50 probability game. He's not. Already just going into the game before it starts, he's really only got a 33% or so chance to win. The Jets have Fitzpatrick back, which is to their benefit. They're 7.5-point power spread favorite. That might be a little high for Jacksonville. But that basically means Jacksonville's got only a 25% chance to win the game. I love Jacksonville. I love them in the sense I'd love to work with them or for them, and I have a lot of thoughts about Jacksonville. I've tried to get to them. Mr. Khan's son heads their analytics department. He's the owner, but They don't do enough when it comes to making the wisest strategy decisions there. The Vikings-Rams, two really good defensive teams. Two, I think, could be the two wild card teams, actually. St. Louis and Minnesota were two of our picks from the beginning of the year. So I think you'll see a low-scoring game here and a really, actually a good game, although they're playing in Minnesota, which doesn't get home field advantage much because they're in that college stadium. The Dolphins and Bills, Taylor is back for the Bills. He made a real big difference when he was in the lineup, and the backups for the Bills are not doing, or didn't play very well. The Dolphins, again, after those two upstart games when they had the head coaching change, this game should be a pretty close game. These teams are basically power rated relatively equally. It just depends if Buffalo can get the home calls, which they should, and Coach Ryan, who I like, makes the he doesn't need to make aggressive basic strategy decisions. He just makes sure, especially as demonstrative, as he is, that they get the home calls they're supposed to be getting. Tennessee and New Orleans, listen, I can tell you right now, Tennessee is not an 8-point power spread better than New Orleans, better than Tennessee, which is what it's listed out in Nevada. That's actually much less. New Orleans just give them 4 or 5 points for being at home, and they're almost even teams. Maybe New Orleans a little bit better, but that's too many points. Power spread for New Orleans. If you're Tennessee, if Mariota's in, they got a chance. Without Mariota, they probably don't. But either way, Marcus Mariota has got to produce on third down by running. He's got to run. Okay, and he, as I noted, I put him as one of the top-ranked NFL quarterbacks in power spread, and he will be in the future if they can make that happen. Another game of the power spread that's too big, at least their version of it in Nevada, is New England against the Redskins. New England can play their normal game, but they're probably only going to win that game by a touchdown. Washington needs to be highly aggressive. Coach Gruden, I like his brother, but they really don't make any dramatic decisions. He really calls their strategy games close to the vest, and that will cause them to lose. I mean, when you're a 14-point power spread underdog, I have my chart in front of me, you really only have about a 5% chance to win that game, maybe 10. Okay, so you've got to make some decisions that are aggressive. Green Bay against Carolina, I think, Green Bay will rebound. Carolina, we liked Indy last week, probably could have won that game. Carolina will be a little tired. I know Green Bay is getting a little tired defensively and weakening. That should be a good defensive game, but it might, just because of these defenses, be a little more high scoring. But those are two, obviously, I think, playoff teams. If Carolina can continue, they're still, like I said, a little overrated, though, and in that weak division. Atlanta, San Francisco, the change to Gabbert. I've had Gabbert always low-rated, power-rated, with regards to the quarterback position, so I don't know that that's going to really be a help, but I do know, again, Atlanta is not 7 points better, especially on the road to San Francisco, no matter who's starting at quarterback. I would still actually rather see Colin Kaepernick in there, but that means basically Atlanta's 11 points better than San Francisco on a neutral field, or 10 at least, and that's not accurate, okay? And you saw that last week when, the projection we made about Tampa. So how that equates to people in Nevada, there you go. I only got a few minutes left here, so I'm probably, going to try to knock this out quick and make a couple fantasy notes. Giants and Tampa Bay, this is a toss-up game, two weak teams, two bad divisions. You don't know what's going to happen, and both of them, these are the two most, risk-reward gambling, if you will, quarterbacks. Shotgun quarterbacks, breeding quarterbacks you can get in Eli and Jameis. Broncos and Colts. Colts are at home. Colts, a lot of turmoil there. Obviously, Denver, high-rated team. Colts can do this at home. Colts should be a 5-6 point home field advantage team, but Coach, Pagano, I appreciate and respect him and always love the Colts, but they don't do a lot of NFL ESP or make those type of decisions. Eagles are playing the Cowboys. This is the Sunday night game. This, again, is two weak teams in the weakest division, two of the weaker teams. This game could be a free-for-all, okay? It's just like the Giants game a couple weeks ago when they played Philly, and then the Giants and Tampa. You never know what you're going to get with those two teams. Although I do think that Alex can do a lot better this week, and Castle is getting a better hold of the offense. And finally, you've got the Chargers playing the Bears. A lot of people are investing in the Chargers. I would maybe think the Bears, even though I kind of didn't want to say anything really disparaging about Coach Fox. but I know the head coach there, Mike, I don't know his name off the top of my head. God bless, I just slips my mind. The San Diego head coach doesn't really make any really positive or productive or aggressive basic strategy decision calls, and he might need to there, especially if they fall behind in turnovers, but that's basically an even game, and you're just giving San Diego some points for being at home field, and they really don't have a pronounced home field in San Diego. I guess more of a laid-back crowd there, that type of thing. So wrapping it up, let me make some fantasy notes here. We're really active on DraftKings and even FanDuel, which I like. And again, a lot of the fantasy notes I made yesterday, a lot of these quote-unquote surprise players came out. But again, what we do is just take advantage of the use of the power spread and just really also what people, you want to have a contrarian point of view and go against public opinion. If the public's all thinking a game is going to be really high scoring, it's going to be a low scoring game usually. And then if it's a low scoring game, your fantasy points are going to be low. Your players aren't going to have a lot of production. So you really want to just go against the mainstream people and definitely against the mainstream media. I watch this fantasy show a little bit on Sunday mornings, and golly, I don't know how they can even use the word quote-unquote expert. But nonetheless, I'm not perfect either. If I was, I'd be winning every week in fantasy. But, I'm just getting the groove on now, so prayerfully if I can stay humble and keep my humility and modesty and just trust God, there's nothing you can't do without God, and you can't do anything without him. Okay, so anyway, having said that, the 30 minutes is up here. Thank you. God bless. This is Mark Anthony DeBello, and this has been NFL Moneyball.